Hello and welcome, I'm Jack, and today we're going to be talking about Steam. PC gaming and Steam are synonymous. With 47 million active players every day, it's easily the largest platform for PC games, and for developers that is an eye-wateringly large number of potential customers. But the storefront is very oversaturated and highly competitive, and many indie devs who don't have the budget for marketing campaigns are naturally wondering, is Steam still the best place to sell my game, and what can I do to stand out from the crowd? So if you're just here for answers to those questions, I'll put a timestamp so you can skip to that section, but I thought before delving into that, I'd talk about Steam Greenlight, where it came from and how it died. For the first few years, Steam was basically closed off to indie devs. You either had to be a big AAA company or have a proven track record of making high quality, successful games. Many users and devs at the time complained that it was actually too restrictive, and so in response to this, Valve launched the Steam Greenlight program in 2012. Devs could pay a nominal fee of $100, which Valve donated to charity, to put their games up on Greenlight where users could vote for them. Then, if you got enough traction and it was clear people wanted to play your game, Valve would approve it for release on Steam. In the first month, only 10 games were approved, including well-known titles like Black Mesa and Project Zomboid. This was followed by 21 games a month later, with such games as Octodad Dadliest Catch and the ill-fated Yog Ventures. Anyone remember that disaster? Then, in August 2013, less than a year after launch, 100 games were greenlit, and this is where the floodgates opened. In 2014, over 1,700 games were approved. In 2015, there was nearly twice that number. And throughout Greenlight's lifetime, we'd see an exponential rise in the number of games that were being approved. From the outset, this seems like a good thing. If more games are getting released, then developers have more opportunities to reach players, and users have more options for what to play. That is until you see the quality of games that were being approved. It was a veritable shit show, an array of broken buggy messes with stolen content, childish developers, and frame rates that made Microsoft PowerPoint look like an Unreal tech demo. And during this time, we of course saw the rise of the asset flip. You see, if you wanted to make a game but couldn't be bothered with the hassle of actually making anything original, you could buy pre-made assets and environments from places like the Unity store, throw them all together and call it a day. This led to a flurry of quickly made, low-quality games that all look pretty much exactly the same since they all use the same assets. It's important to note that using pre-made assets certainly isn't a bad thing in and of itself, and for developers working on a shoestring budget, they can be an invaluable resource. But it was the rushed and slapdash manner with which these assets were cobbled together with little regard for aesthetic consistency or, actually making a good game. Arguably the most famous asset flippers were Digital Homicide, who released a slew of crappy titles. They would frequently put out dozens of separate games that were literally the same game but with slightly different textures. And when the review scores tanked, they would go through and remove negative reviews and comments and threaten the users who left them. They even tried to sue YouTuber Jim Sterling for $10 million because of a video he made on their game The Slaughtering Grounds. I'll leave a link to Jim's video about the lawsuit because it's honestly just such a bizarre and interesting story. Around this time, I also started working on my first proper game, Orbital Cargo, which I of course put up on Greenlight, and it was approved. Honestly, this game shouldn't have been greenlit. It was buggy, not really that much fun to play, and looked like garbage. And even though I'd like to think it was leagues ahead of any asset flip, I was only like 16 at the time I think. I was obviously very naive and had no idea what I was doing. And a professional storefront like this should be no place for kids who have no idea what they're doing. Despite getting the green light, I actually ended up not releasing Orbital Cargo on Steam, I think because I got bored and wanted to work on something else, but like I say, I really don't think it should have been approved in the first place. Needless to say, Greenlight didn't work, and the lack of quality assurance on Valve's behalf led to Steam being filled with these garbage games. To the point where genuinely high quality games couldn't get the attention they deserved. It used to be a massive accomplishment to get your game on Steam, and you were pretty much guaranteed a player base because there wasn't as much competition. But by the end of Greenlight, an average of 50 games were being released on Steam every day. Anyone could do it, and the barrier for entry was practically non-existent. Valve eventually realised that something needed to be done, and in June of 2017, Greenlight was thrown in the garbage and replaced with Steam Direct. Instead of users voting on submissions, Valve would rigorously check that games were suitable for release and were of a high enough quality. Supposedly, this would weed out bad games and make it easier for good games to be discovered. At least that was the idea. But in 2018, Steam saw a record 9,050 games being released. That's about 25 games every single day. With that kind of competition, it's now very difficult for developers to gain any traction on Steam and for their games to be discovered by users. And that's reflected in sales. Games released in 2019 made on average half as much money as those released in 2018. And a lot of studios who pour thousands of hours of work into their games actually make less than minimum wage. So the question is it still worth releasing your game on Steam? And if not, what other options do you have? These are questions I've definitely been asking myself recently. My latest game, Warp Factor, has only sold a handful of copies, and since this is something that I eventually want to be able to do full time, it's obviously important for me to understand why that is and what I can do about it. So with that said, here's some advice from other developers and content creators on what you can do to make your game's launch a success. Ryan Clark, the developer of games like Crypto the Necrodancer and Cadence of Hyrule, says figuring out what hooks your game has is very important. Hooks are meant to grab people's attention and compel them to play your game. Practically anything in your game can be a hook, from its core mechanics to its art style and even its title. Generally speaking, the more hooks you have the better, and it's obviously important to include them in your marketing and promotional material so that people see them. Speaking of promotional material, the next tip is: when a user clicks on your game in the store and gets taken to the landing page, 99% of the time the first thing they're going to look at is the trailer. And if you have a lazily slapped together trailer, then people are going to immediately click off your page and go and look at something more engaging. So it's important to effectively communicate the core mechanics and hooks of your game in a short space of time. Ideally this should be done visually, but if you have to use text or a voiceover, then make sure to use short, memorable sentences or tell a story that will stick in the viewers' heads. The trailer should be relatively short, and the first 10 seconds are by far the most important, so make an engaging opening that immediately draws people in. Steam tends to automatically mute videos as well, so make sure that your trailer still works effectively without sound. Mark Brown of Game Maker's Toolkit has an excellent video on making a good trailer where he goes into much more detail, so be sure to check that out. If no one knows about your game, then they're sure as hell not going to buy it. But by building a community around your game early on in its development, you can ensure that when it comes to launch day, you'll already have a large group of people who get it, as well as leaving positive reviews and sharing it with their friends. Mike Rose of No More Robots has done a number of GDC lectures where he talks about promoting indie games and building a community on a tight budget, and in one of them he pretty much gives a step-by-step guide on how to do it. One of the most powerful tools he talks about is Discord. On Discord, you can set up a chat server where you can share stuff about your game and get immediate responses from people who are interested. And most people who use Discord are PC gamers, so they're already kind of interested in what you have to offer. It's important obviously to not just post updates, but also actually engage with your audience, respond to things they say and questions they ask, and make them feel like a valued member of the community. These days, indie devs are looking more and more to YouTube and Twitch as forms of essentially free advertising. Let's plays and gaming streams have absolutely exploded in popularity, and if you can get a content creator with a large fan base to play your game, then that is some fantastic marketing that you haven't had to pay a penny for. But what this means is that it's important to make a game that isn't just fun to play, but is also fun to watch other people play. Jason Rohrer, the developer of the game 1 Hour 1 Life, has talked before on making games that are what he calls infinite unique situation generators. These allow for hours of varied gameplay, as opposed to a consumable game which essentially provides the same experience to every player. Making games that allow for these unique situations means that YouTubers and streamers can make hours of varied content on just a single game, and obviously the more videos there are out there of your game, the more likely people are to see it and check it out for themselves. Steam actually has a number of tools that you can use to better promote your game and reach a wider audience. One such tool is Curator Connect, which allows you to reach out to Steam curators who will review your game and post about it to their followers. It's important to only contact curators who make games that are of the same ilk, as Steam limits the number of keys you can send out through the Curator Connect service. Another thing you can use is visibility rounds, which essentially promote your game to people who have it in their wishlist. It's generally best to time visibility rounds with major content updates or sales periods, as they're more likely to draw people in that way. A lot of people wishlist games because they're waiting for it to go on sale or for an update to come out, and this is a great way to let them know when that happens. If you want to know more, Ask Game Dev has a brilliant video where they go through a number of tools that Steam provides for developers and how to best use them. Of course, if you're still put off by the deluge of games that get released on Steam every day, then your other option is So what other platforms exist besides Steam? Well, it turns out there's quite a lot actually. Itch.io is a very popular alternative among indies that actually embraces the unpolished in-development angle and allows developers to get instant feedback from players and be constantly updating and improving their games. It has a flexible pricing system and allows for everything from prototypes to demos to complete games. Humble also offers a range of services from the very popular Humble Bundles, as well as a storefront that you have to apply for. It definitely has a much higher barrier for entry than Steam, but what that means is people know they're getting quality games, and your game's more likely to be discovered. But even if you don't get approved for release on the Humble store, you can still make use of the Humble widget, which allows you to sell your game on your website, but without having to worry about handling payments. There's a lot of other websites like GOG and the Epic Store that again have higher standards and allow for better exposure, as well as ones like Congregate that are much more open and allow for lots of different types of content. The only other thing I would say is important to consider is that Steam offers a lot of integration options with the Steam client. For example, displaying achievements and leaderboards, but also more complex stuff like handling online multiplayer and matchmaking. This level of integration isn't really offered anywhere else to the same extent, and if you're planning on putting your Steam game on another platform, you'll likely have to think about how you handle those things without the use of the Steam API, or whether you can even do them at all. I've included links to all the videos I've mentioned in the description. They go into far more detail than I have here, and honestly, if you're an up-and-coming indie developer wondering how to best market your game, then I would say you should definitely try and watch them as they offer invaluable advice. If you enjoyed this video, then be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. And if you're on your own game development journey, then why not leave a comment with your thoughts on selling games through Steam? I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. I'll also include a link to my latest game Warp Factor, which you can check out on Steam. It's a cool little arcadey action game with global leaderboards, online multiplayer and a level editor. All that remains for me to say is thanks for watching, and I hope to see you soon.